It's all gone dark. Maybe I should start talking. I can't talk with this hat on. Okay, I'll be all right. Now, I don't know what I'm supposed to be talking about. Somebody said, are we alone in the universe? But Liz originally suggested I should talk about my life and career. Which would you like to have?
Life and career.
Life and career, right, that's what you've got.
Life, career and everything.
Yeah. I should point out that there's never been any plan in my life at all. I've no idea what I want to do when I grow up.
I don't think any of us do either.
I went to this school when I was 8 years old. It was then a boys' school. They eventually took girls in, and 40 years later, it became very famous because somebody called Kate Middleton went there. Nothing to do with me. Well, probably was. She probably knew about me. Anyway, there I am.
Honestly.
In 19, whatever it was, 60, 50, I don't know, 1, 2, something like that. And then after I finished school, I went off to this school to teach. I was then 18. And this is Rajkumar College, and I taught English and PE, believe it or not, at 6 in the morning for a year. And it was wonderful. It was a complete culture shock. I spent a year there. There was no English person there. I learnt a lot of Hindi, and I learnt a lot of other stuff as well. And I came back and went to university, and before I came back I went native, obviously, as one does. And I used to go in to teach with a parrot on my shoulder. It was called Tota, the parrot, which is Hindi for parrot. And you'll notice that I've acquired a white streak in my hair. There we are. I started out with dark hair and got that white streak while I was in India. And here I am at home, back at home, and you'll see with brown cords and a sweater, and yeah, well, more or less as I am now, except that now I have white hair with a dark streak. Then I went to university and I did a lot of work. Here I am rowing at number 6, very, very important. Number 5, beg your pardon. Slaving away in the boat. I loved rowing, it was super. And I played a lot of games, and squash was my favourite game. And I played tennis and cricket and goodness knows what, and I didn't do a lot of work. But somehow I survived, and I got a degree, and I got a doctorate in York, and I went to Canada to do some postdoctoral research. And you'll see that I'm wearing elegant, tidy clothes, as I always have in my life, and doing postdoctoral chemistry. And then I couldn't get a job as a chemist in university, so I dropped out into publishing, and I became a science editor at the Oxford University Press.
I've never seen such ghastly glasses.
Thank you for that polite comment.
You look like Hugh from Spectre.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
You'll notice I'm wearing a very smart jacket and tie, which persisted even when I got bored of the OUP and went on to work for Yorkshire Television, and I'm still wearing a jacket and tie. Even with 2 telephones in my ear, and trying to be serious. And then there was a serious change in my life, because one Friday afternoon, somebody said, could you ever change yourself completely? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, change the way you live and the way you dress and so on. So 5 of us agreed that on Monday morning we would all wear completely different clothes. And so instead of wearing a jacket and tie and grey flannels and all that, I put on white cricket trousers and an open neck shirt, or a sweater I think it was, and I combed my hair straight back. And I went in, tiptoed in on Monday morning. I was so terrified they didn't want to see me. I think I was a complete idiot. And none of the others had bothered. Bastards. But they said, Adam, you look 10 years younger. And I thought, wow, this dressing up look is quite fun. So when they sent me off to Texas to get some medical stories, when I arrived in Houston, it was Go Texan Week, and everyone in the street was wearing, with briefcases and so on, they were wearing the jeans and the boots and the hats and so on. I went into Silksig's Western store on Main Street, and I got the, where am I? Oh, here we are. And I got, I said, I want to be a cowboy. So here I was, with the boots and the hat. And I still have this hat. In fact, I almost wore it here today. The band is gone. I can no longer wear it with abandon. And I've now got different boots. Those died a death, but I've got different boots. Anyway, I wore this outfit in the office in Leeds. And then I wore it into the studio, and it created a little bit of a stir. The electricians went on strike. They said my hat didn't show sufficient respect for studio discipline. I said I would speak to it very severely. And life did, I have to say, life got better after that. Life was wonderful in television. We did all sorts of programs, and then I got involved with Arthur C. Clarke, and that was a revelation. Huge fun, fantastic travel. I really, really had a ball. So here is Arthur in Sri Lanka with this huge umbrella. He complained bitterly because we took him out to film him, and he got sunburned. So he had to buy him this enormous golf umbrella to keep the sun off him. So the symbol became Arthur with this great umbrella over his head. And here he is. I can't remember what the joke was there. But on his behalf, we investigated mysteries around the world. Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. This is Racetrack Fire. This is in Death Valley, the northern end of Death Valley. If you're at the town of Stovepipe Wells, you drive north for 50 miles, turn left at Ubihibi Crater, go for 3 hours along a dirt track road, you get to Racetrack Fire. And it's a mile long and a mile and a half wide, and it's dead flat. This mud, baked mud, is dead flat. And there are just mountains around. You'll see there is no bush, no tree, no blade of grass. It's just brown and blue, that's all. And the rocks move about in the night. So if you go there early in the morning, it's quite clear that this rock has moved maybe 100 yards. And nobody knows why. And there are hundreds of rocks on the surface, and some are tiny little pebbles, and some are great big boulders, and most of them move. And on average, a rock moves about once a year. Not easy to observe, because this is 30 miles from any building. It's a long way from anywhere. And you're not allowed to camp there. We did it. It's the most wonderful evening. Charlie, who was with me, he's a great outdoor man, and he'd bought a barbecue in Las Vegas and a lot of dead animal. And he was barbecuing away, and I was photographing. It was a full moon, and Mars was in conjunction with Jupiter, and there's no human being for 30 miles. It's dark, wonderful vision of the night sky. Anyway, that was one of the mysteries we investigated for Arthur C. Clarke, and I'd just like to sort of mention a few others. And you're most welcome to ask me about them afterwards. This is one of the most intriguing. I'm sorry about the bad picture, but it was a horrible dark room in Munich. This is the Baghdad Battery. This thing was dug up in Baghdad in a site that was apparently about 1,000 years old. Nobody knows exactly, and they're not terribly efficient, the Iraqis, or they weren't terribly efficient about the dating, but it looks to be about 1,000 years old. And in the end, several were dug up, very similar. So there's a ceramic jar, which is an earthenware pot with a hole in the top, and then there is a copper cylinder, rather stained with time, and an iron rod. Now, quite clearly, the iron rod would fit inside the copper cylinder, and that would fit inside the ceramic jar. And if you put lemon juice in, or orange juice, or any old juice, grape juice, you would generate 1.5 volts between these two things. You would generate electricity. Now, people say, oh, they were scroll holders. Well, why would you use iron and copper? It seems very odd, They're not cheap, those things, 1,000 years ago. So were people really generating electricity 1,000 years ago? The first we know about current electricity was 1799. Alessandro Volta invented the electric battery. But maybe he was 700 years out of date, 800 years out of date. Very strange. Wonderful mystery, because nobody can answer it. Nobody knows whether this really happened, but we do have these solid artifacts. They were brought to Munich, incidentally, by a sort of Iraqi KGB man, a very, very suspicious bloke with a hat and shades, who stood there with a machine gun while we did all this filming. So that's the Baghdad Battery. This was a bloke called Ken Owen, who loved lying on a bed of nails with his daughter standing on his chest. And this was what his back looked like afterwards. And the question was, why didn't he die of the pain? And the answer is, you're spreading it out. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4 times 15 or something, that's 60 pins sticking in his back. If you spread out your weight over 60 points, they don't all go through it. You'll notice there's no blood. There are some holes, but no blood. So if you're going to have a bed of nails, have lots of nails. Okay, that's my advice. Don't try it with 2 or 3 nails, you'll die. Have it with 60, 70 nails, you'll be absolutely fine.
So that's why my friend's cat to
Sorry?
report when it kept jumping over me last night when I was in bed.
Yeah, dead right. Here is Arthur with a couple of girls who claim they were reincarnated, that they used to be terrorist boys, I think they were, now reincarnated. Reincarnation is very widely believed in Sri Lanka and in other places. Arthur was living in Sri Lanka at the time. It's the most beautiful country. If you have a chance, do go there. It's lovely, and so are the people. Trevor Pease. We investigated ghosts, all sorts of ghosts, and Trevor Pease saw a ghost on a number 19 bus in Plymouth. Very exotic this, we travelled the world. He said he was the bus conductor and a family of 4 got on, and behind them was an old lady who was clearly part of the family. She was clearly the mother of either the father or the mother. And they all got on, they sat down and you know, he carried on, and 2 stops later he went to collect the fares, and there were only 4 of them up there, and the man said, 4 to the city centre please. And he said, but there were 5 of you when you got on. And they had a little discussion, and it turned out that she was the mum's mother and had died a year before. And he was absolutely convinced that she'd gone on with them and was, you know. So, a real live ghost sighting in Plymouth. You don't have to go that far. And, oh, I've missed out. Shucks. Oh, we'll probably come to it later. Dowsing. We had a lot of fun with dowsing. People douse with all sorts of equipment, in all parts of the world. And this guy, Colonel Harry Grattan, after the war, we decided to set up a major military base in northern Germany. It became known as JHQ Rheindalen. It's near Düsseldorf. And when they picked the site and they marked it all out and so on, and they needed a water supply. And there are 3 German water supplies around the site, but they're all rather poor water. They're rather alkaline and not very high volume. And he was worried about this. He thought, we've got to have a secure water supply. And so he went out dowsing, not only walking like this, but also on horseback. And he went all over the patch, and he found water. And he found water, they then drilled boreholes, and that water has supplied 10,000 men ever since 1953, I think it was, so that's 60 years. The water that he found by dowsing with a hazel rock. This is a forked twig which dipped downwards when he was over water. I don't know whether dowsing works. It certainly doesn't work for me, but it does seem to work for some people. And he was a remarkably straight guy. He was no longer able, he's quite old now, as you see, he walks with sticks, no longer able to ride a horse, sadly, because we would love to have put him on a horse. But he told us, you know, in great detail about how he found it. And we had a great time at Rheindalen. And there's this Clayton McDowell in West Salem, Illinois, and he does this for oil. And he usually does it from his Cadillac. He drives along in his Cadillac and says, oh, I think we'll try here. And his wife Marge has to take the wheel, and he does this while he's sitting in the driving seat. He says, oh, stop, we'll drill a well. And he's drilled something like 30 wells. Here's one of them. The nodding donkey pumping away. And he's a millionaire. He's got trotting horses, or he had them, trotting horses in his backyard. One of them fetched $60,000, and I think he had 100 of them there. I mean, it's quite a lot of money involved in this oil. He even offered to sell us a share in an oil well, but it all got a bit complicated. You have to have an American address to write a check and so on. This is the one that should have been the ghosts. I beg your pardon. This is Mount Carmel Cemetery on the west side of Chicago, and this is Al Capone's grave. You remember Al Capone, who murdered a whole lot of people in the Valentine's Day Massacre. He was a mother's boy in life, and he lies next to his mother in death. And his gravestone's been stolen once or twice, which is why it's new and not overcome by grass. And the chap who took us there, Richard T. Crow, runs supernatural tours of Chicago. And he claims he has proof of the existence of ghosts. Positive proof that ghosts exist. Because he went there one year, on All Saints' Day, all right? 1st of November. That's the day after Halloween. Now, always on Halloween, there would be people in the graveyard looking for ghosts, okay? And when he went there the following morning with a coachload of people, he found a case of beer on Al's grave. Now, he said, if the students had been, there must have been students there, you know, undergraduates or something, gone there to look for ghosts. If they'd been frightened by the cops, either they would have taken the beer with them, or the cops would have taken the beer. The only explanation, he says, is they were frightened by ghosts and so terrified they left the beer behind. That is proof positive of the existence of ghosts. There are other wonderful stories of this same cemetery where people smell roses. There was a lady down the road, about 100 yards away. It's got a terrific cemetery. Whenever you go there, wonderful Italian sort of sculptures and things. I went to a spoon bending party in Covina, California. You remember the passion for spoon bending and Uri Geller and all that? So we went to this party, and there were 30, 40, 50 people there of all ages and sexes, quite a variety in California. And they would hold up a spoon and say, 1, 2, 3, bend! And everyone shouted bend, and then suddenly there were lots of bent spoons. Very remarkable. Terrible if it was your cutlery, wouldn't it? I never did understand that, really. Or indeed the point of bending spoons, but they certainly had a good time. And then Grover and Millie Higgins. They were some of the many people who claim to have seen or heard Bigfoot. Bigfoot is the American equivalent of the Yeti. The northwest of the United States is incredibly wild. This is Oregon and Washington State. Let me tell you a story. 2 girls took off from Portland, Oregon in a light plane, and they were flying up to Seattle, which is 200 miles north, straight up the Pacific Highway. It's a very simple flight. They knew where they were going, and they got into trouble on the way. And they put out a mayday call and said they were in trouble, and they crashed. And they actually crashed 17 miles from a small town called Chehalis. And search parties went out to look for the plane, and they found it 31 months later. That's how wild the country is. It's mountains and forests, endless forests. This is the land of the Cascade Range of Mountains, where Mount St. Helens blew up 20 years ago. Anyway, these two claimed to have heard Bigfoot. They didn't say they'd seen it, they'd heard it. I tell you, when I saw those forests, I began to believe there might be something living in there that no one had ever seen. And what was so amazing, I met these guys in a tiny town called Estacada, south of Portland, Oregon. They said, drive down to Estacada, and at the stoplight, I said, which stoplight? They said, there is only one. Estacada is not a large town. There's a cafe. They said, we'll be there. And they were. And what was so amazing was that Grover, who was then sort of 90 or something, came over from further east in a covered wagon in 1894. I mean, you read about these things, the covered wagons and the people going west to seek that, and he'd actually done that. He was only 5 years old or something, but he actually came out, and I just thought, wow, this is real history. A lovely guy, he'd only got about 1 tooth, but he was very jolly and cheerful, and his tough daughter was running the show, obviously. You see what I mean by travelling. I mean, when you get on a show like that, you really have I went to 45 of the 50 American states. Wonderful. Ken Arnold. Now this guy will appear. Anyone heard of Ken Arnold?
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1947, he used to sell fire extinguishers. Again, we're still in Washington State now. And he had his own plane, and he was to fly about and try and sell these fire extinguishers. And one day, he was flying from Seattle, or SeaTac Airport it is now, to Yakima, which is about 100 miles east. And on his way, he was high up above the Cascade Range of Mountains, and he suddenly saw some little points of light, maybe 10 of them, flying across the sky like that. He couldn't see, they were a long way away, and he couldn't see what they were, but they were clearly moving across, and he thought they were going very fast, and he timed them between 2 of the mountains, Mount Rainier, as they call it, or Rainier, as we would say, and Mount Hood. And he reckoned from the time they took, they must have been doing about 1,000 miles an hour. Now, in 1947, nothing could do 1,000 miles an hour, so it was very strange. And he landed at Yakima, and he refueled, and he told the people there about it. And he went on to Moses Lake, which is another 100 miles, and when he landed there, there was a reporter. And the reporter said, what did you see? What did you see? And he said, well, I saw these points of light. And they were flying across the sky. How else were you going to know? How did they fly? And he said, well, it was hard to see because they're so far away. They sort of fluttered. He said, it was like you'd skim a saucer across a pond. And the headline the next morning, Flying Saucers. He didn't say it. This was made up by some rookie reporter in Moses Lake, Washington State. But ever since then, of course, flying saucers have been the thing. More and more photographs have appeared, better and better as Photoshop improved. You know. There is no earthly reason why space should be saucer-shaped. It's nonsense, you know. It should be long and thin, obviously, to reduce drag when it's going through in the atmosphere. And yet, because he said that, like you'd skim a saucer across a pond, this is what people have believed ever since. Wonderful. He was a nice, straight guy, well, fairly straight for an American. I saw him at his home in Boise, Idaho, and I was most impressed because he had gold-plated taps in the loo where I would know. I'm impressed by the silliest things. But it was good fun. It was good fun meeting him. Now, here's a really sinister story. David Booth, a rather shifty character, a mechanic. We tracked him down in the middle of Ohio, and in 1974, I think it was, he had a dream. He dreamed that he was standing in a field and he saw a plane going overhead. It was a great big silver jet and it had American Airlines on the side. But it wasn't making enough noise. It was very low and it wasn't making enough noise. And as he watched it, it turned over onto one wingtip and went straight into the ground, and there was a huge fireball. And the next night he had the same dream again, and again. And he tried drinking, and he tried smoking dope, and he tried everything, and he still kept on having this dream. And he'd wake up crying and screaming, and his wife, which was a very sweet wife he had, tried to, calm him down. And eventually said, look, I've got to go to the authorities. And he phoned American Airlines, and they said, go and see a shrink. And he phoned the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and he got to talk to an official there who interviewed him at great length about what he'd seen, what was on the ground, other things, where, if this is something waiting to happen, where was it? Could they do anything to prevent it? And he told him full details of what had happened. And then the FAA man, Paul Williams, went home, and on the sort of 5th day after he'd been talking to him, he was driving home, and he heard on the radio the news of a crash of an American Airlines jet coming out of Chicago. And one of the engines, what had happened was the maintenance was poor, and something had flipped up over the wing and simply taken that engine out. So it's now flying on only one engine and one wing, essentially, and the whole plane had tilted like that and gone straight into the ground, precisely as David Booth had described 5 days earlier. And it was absolutely horrifying. And they thought that maybe he had something to do with it, and they investigated him, thoroughly. But no, it was quite clear that he was 1,000 miles away and didn't know anything about it. And yet his description was absolutely stunning. And you began to think, maybe there is such a thing as premonition. Maybe some people have this ability. And so all sorts of efforts have been made to try and tap into this. A premonitions bureau was set up in London, and so on and so forth. And then we got to meet another man, which was also most intriguing. Richard Newton was a teacher in Massachusetts, and he predicted at the end of one year, just before Christmas, that in the week of Easter, the week of the 14th of March, the Ides of March, that a plane with a red logo on the tail would crash just outside a major population centre in the Northern Hemisphere, and that 50 people would be killed, which was a fairly firm prediction. Well, it so happened that on the 11th of March, 3 days early, a plane, a Royal Jordanian's jet with a red logo on the tail, did crash just outside Doha in the Persian Gulf, and 47 people were killed. His prediction was almost spot on. It was really creepy. And here is this prediction from a guy in North America predicting an air crash across the world. And the people said, how the hell did you do that? How did you know? And he said, it's just statistics. He said, on average, more than half the planes flying in the world have red logos on the tail. Almost all accidents happen just outside the airport, either on takeoff or landing, and that's always outside a major population centre. 80% of them are in the northern hemisphere. There's very little in the southern hemisphere. And the average number of people killed in a plane crash is 50. So I just put those together and predicted, oh, and the worst week of the year, if you plot the number of crashes per week of the year, the worst week is the Ides of March, the second week in March, probably because of the changing weather patterns and maybe the changing crews around that time. So he put all those together and made this prediction, and you just think, wow, he's psychic. No, statistics will do it for you. And you just wonder whether a lot of premonitions, apparent premonitions, are just some gut instinct based on the information we have. So, very intriguing. Jeff Randolph, rather suspicious character, lived in San Luis Obispo. He used to fly up to Lake Tahoe in California to gamble. Lake Tahoe is beautiful. It's a ski resort in the winter, and it's very beautiful in the summer, and they have huge casinos there. And he had a premonition one night that he was going to win $1 million. And on the plane, he says, he shaved for the second time that day because he wanted to look presentable and extra nice to people for all the photos that were going to be taken after he won the money. Well, he started playing the slot machines and he won $992,000. And the casino made it up to a cool $1 million, and here is his check. $1 million. Now, is that a premonition, or do gamblers always know they're going to win? You know, was it just...
I've got a lucky streak, I'm going to win.
Exactly. And you always know that today. You know, I'm going to put 50 quid on Noblinese into 330. I know he's going to win.
They tend to do more than most people do.
Yeah.
It's like the lottery winner, the one who puts 20 tickets in, is 20 times more likely to win than the one who... It's the chance that he will win.
That's right. But, you know, did he really have a practice? We don't know. You'll never know. He said it was fascinating because then he got propositions of marriage from all over the States, and he had to audition all these women, of course. But in the end, I think he would turn them all down because they were so far away, most of them, that there was no possibility of their joining together. So, Arthur was quite funny about all these. And he said, well, most of these stories, most of these claims, well, let's say 50% of these claims are complete nonsense. But I don't know, and nor does anyone else, which 50% are nonsense and which are true. That's the problem with all these mysteries, all these claims that people have seen ghosts. How do we know? People claim they did this. Unless they write it down in advance, you know evidence. And even then, it may be dodgy. I mean, it may be that Jeff Thingy wrote down every time he went to Las Vegas or to Lake Tahoe, I'm going to win $1 million. You know, it'd be very convenient to have that for the paper afterwards, wouldn't it? So we had a wonderful time. I mean, it was great fun. Talking to Arthur, you can't actually see this, but he's in the middle of eating a mango ice cream. We did have a great time with Arthur, although he was a slightly curious character and very interesting. He was so proud of having invented the communication satellite, which he did, and he had a satellite dish in his room or in his house in Sri Lanka. And he said, look at this, and he took his handset and he twiddled and twiddled and twiddled, and eventually we got a picture. And it turned out to be a woman in Moscow reading the news, but unfortunately there was no sound. So it wasn't terribly exciting to watch, you know, somebody reading the news in the foreign language. But nevertheless, he got the picture. He was so excited. He really was. He just was a very excitable bloke. And he, of course, he wrote wonderful books. I don't know about you, but I love Rendezvous with Rama. It's, I think, my favourite. And of course, 2001 is one of my favourite movies. Why didn't they revive it in 2001? Why wasn't it in every cinema in the country? I don't know.
It came out last year for the anniversary.
Oh.
It was in the cinemas last year for the anniversary. It was brilliant. Go and watch it on the big screen.
Which anniversary?
It was the 35th, Gary. Which one did we go see?
No, because it came out in '68. It's no anniversary last year.
I can't remember now. I know it was out recently.
Oh, maybe that's 35, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was last year.
Or the year before. Oh, well, I must have missed it, because it is a fantastic movie still.
To see it on the big screen.
Big screen. You've got to have a big screen. Instead of watching it on the telly, now you need a big screen. I think one of the great movies of all time. Anyway, about this time in my life, I'm trying to tell you about my career. Sorry, I decided various things: to wear odd clothes, like my Stetson and my boots, to take photography seriously, and to write books. I decided I was never going to earn very much in the way of salary. And the great thing is, if you take photographs and you write books, you earn royalties. And nobody can stop you earning royalties, and it doesn't matter if you've got a salary, you still earn royalties. So I started taking photography seriously. And over the years, I took many, many photographs, like this, and this, and this. That was Sue's son's pet rat called Sniffles. And it was actually Waitrose Ratatouille, and her sister and her family printed T-shirts and walked up and down Waitrose like this. And this. No. And this picture was probably my best. I found this plant growing behind the police station. Don't worry. And my photo library said they wanted one of these, so I took quite a lot of pictures actually, and the great body shop decided they want to launch a range called Hemp Revival for Skin Survival, and they used my picture. Oh, that made me, well, let's say a year's salary in what had been 1,000th of a second while the flash was going off. If only I could gross that up, it would be really nice. But still, that has done me extremely well, and I can still sell you one for small consideration.
And I can still provide you more leaves if you want them.
Shut up! It's illegal. Meanwhile, I was writing books furiously, and you'll see, look, I'm quite thin now. This was my back garden in Yorkshire, and then came along Local Heroes. I'd been producing programs up till then on television, for Yorkshire Television, but then I got the wrong side of the camera by mistake, and we made this series called Local Heroes, in which I rode around the cover. I got this pink and yellow mountain bike, and I bought pink and yellow gear to go with it, and a yellow hat, and I rode around the country talking about dead scientists. We chose dead scientists because old science is much easier to understand, and they would be unlikely to sue when we got it wrong. And one of the first people we covered was Thomas Crapper, who was born at Thorne near Doncaster in Yorkshire, and walked to London, became a plumber, set up his own business and in Chelsea, and it's still running, run by a friend of mine called Simon Kirby in Stratford. You can even now buy a Thomas Crapper high flash suite and all the trappings go with it. So it was a very successful business, and he was a very successful plumber. And when I made the program, people became endless jokes, like he was born in 1836, the year before Victoria came to the throne, and so on and so forth. When I made the program and it went out on telly, people got really interested and started asking me all sorts of questions. And Sue here said, "Why don't you write a book about lavatories?" And I said, "Don't be silly." And she said, "Yeah, you've got nothing better to do." So I did. I sat down. So I sat down and I wrote a book on the toilet. And it's still in print, I think. You can buy a copy. And we then later made a follow-up. This is with Sue's daughter, Emily. It's amazing. We thought, I collected so much stuff. I offered the publisher 4 books. An encyclopedia, an encyclopedia, an encyclopedia, and enfata. But they wrote back, no, cut the crap, they said. So they only wanted the first book. We managed to get this one through. So much stuff about urine. I mean, it was used to make alum, it was used by the Romans to stiffen their skirts. There's a song called "I Wouldn't Piss in Your Ear If Your Brain Was on Fire." And Andy Warhol discovered that if he covered a canvas with copper paint and peed on it, he got wonderful colours. So he got all his gay friends in and gave them Mexican beer, which he said was the best, and they all peed on his canvas. And you could probably buy one for about $10 million, So there you are, something to do in your spare time. Copper paint and pee. Well, Local Heroes, which was what that series was, took us all over the world. Eventually, I sold it to the BBC. It took us all over the world, even to Pisa, which is the most beautiful place. If you haven't been there, I strongly recommend it. And I was allowed to drop tomatoes off the Leaning Tower, which was wonderful, truly wonderful. Galileo dropped balls of some sort in 1590, and I was following in his footsteps. The only trouble is you can't actually go up to the very top. You can only go up to that level. And you'll see there's a handrail. The trouble is that the whole thing's leaning. So you've got the walkway is tilted, it's polished marble, and there are trip hazards all the way around. And the guardrail is about that high and very rusty. So
And you're a scaredy cat.
and I'm terrified of heights. So you could easily slip and go down, and I calculated it would take me just over 3 seconds to get to the ground. And so if you watch this movie, you'll find my knuckles are white on the rail, and I never ever let go. Even when I'm holding tomatoes, I've got my elbow around it, you know. However, it was wonderful fun, and we discovered that we spent ages arguing about what to drop, and eventually we said, well, tomatoes. They're very Italian, they're biodegradable, they're not going to cause a terrible mess, they probably won't kill all the Japanese underneath. And I dropped them off stalk up like this, and they fell all the way down stalk up, and they didn't explode. They burst all the way around like Chinese lanterns, but nothing came out, and we were able to pick them up and take them away, no mess at all. So if ever you want to drop tomatoes off the Leaning Tower of Pisa, it's fine, absolutely fine. That was, you know, we went to all sorts of places with local heroes, including Egypt, which was wonderful. If ever you go there, I wouldn't at the moment, but if ever you go there, you drive out of Cairo, which is the most hideous city, and you drive around the corner past the traffic light, and suddenly, wow, there's the pyramid, just there, sort of at the end of a suburban street. And they're huge. I mean, this one, the blocks, this is the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the blocks are about the size of a Mini, I mean like a small car, and there are 2.3 million of those blocks piled up. Just, you know, people say, how do they build the pyramids? Just the sheer effort of getting all those blocks up. Moving any of them anywhere would have been a nightmare. So it was fascinating. And here I am with my bike. We actually bought this bike on the street in Cairo, and I foolishly cycled through the city. I'll never do that again, never. It's called Gummel, it was called Gummel, which is Arab for camel. And it had several, well, there were some things wrong with it, let's put it that way. Anyway, I kept writing, and I found writing on the train was wonderful. I could form into a bubble myself, and I wrote books about the various series we were making. The BBC hauled me off when we made what the Romans did for us, and I wore all this. You were asking about the armour. They did have plate armour, the Romans, but it's quite lightweight. And a helmet, and this is where they're very cunning. This is the spear they have, a pilum. And the very tip is hardened steel, but this bit is soft iron. So what you did, you chucked it at your enemy. If you hit him, he's dead. If you miss and it hits a rock, the end bends over. So it's no good his trying to throw it back, because it's no longer a lethal weapon. Very cunning bit of metallurgy, that. They're quite good at those things, the Romans.
Adam, this occasionally still runs on various TV channels on cable.
Is it still running on cable?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Occasionally I channel hop and I say, oh, what the Romans did for us.
Well, so if you're desperate, and if you're really desperate, you know, and even Strictly is finished, you could go into YouTube and put my name in, and you can watch me for hours. I don't recommend it, but if you're really desperate. Then we did the Victorians, what the Victorians did for us, and that was great fun. Actually, the Romans was terrific, because we had no idea what we were doing. The executive producer was an engineer, and we wandered around the country having a lot of fun, and just doing, oh, let's scale these walls, let's have a horse here and so on. It was great. Victorians, they took a bit too seriously, but it was still good fun. And then I did various bits of radio. This is in a studio somewhere, and radio is wonderfully simple. You don't have to dress up or anything like that. And once I was on the Today programme at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, and they brought the radio car to our house in Bristol. So there it is, parked outside 31 Berkeley Road, and you get in, and it's just like being in a studio. It's very comfortable. You don't have to go anywhere, and you just talk to them straight off. Yes, John, you know, I do think that. I can't remember what I was talking about, but you don't have to dress up at all. And because I became a minor celebrity, I got invited to all sorts of extraordinary events, I mean, very weird things. And this was a party at Buckingham Palace to celebrate, I think it was 50 years of the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. And if you look at this gang, you'll see me there, and you will see, I don't want to pick them all out, but there is Helena Bonham Carter, there is David, what's his name? David Jason.
Iron bless him. Iron bless him. Gordon's alive.
Now, who's this guy, this actor, terribly tall? He's a...
Christopher Lee.
Sorry?
We got Alan Wick at the far side.
Alan Wicker's there, yes. He came up to me at this party and said, excuse me, I'm Alan Wicker. For God's sake, who's famous here, you know? Now, who can tell me which is Darcy Bustle? Is that her? Or is that her?
I think it's the one with the dress.
That's that one there, yeah, the
Is
one
that
with
one?
the dot on. Yeah.
Apparently she's a huge fan of mine, and she came up and said hello, it's lovely. Now, does anyone recognise this bloke? That's Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon.
Senator Aldrin.
He's about 5'6", and it was fascinating because Sue went up to him and said, do you think it's sensible to send men into space? Shouldn't we send robots? Because of all the life support we need for people.
And he said, God wants us humans to spread out into the universe. I administered myself the sacraments on the moon.
His wife was about 75, going on 15, with so much makeup you really couldn't believe it. It was fascinating, a really amazing gathering this. Ben Fogel is there somewhere, is he at the back?
He's at the back, yeah.
He just rode across the Atlantic that week or something. Really extraordinary to me. So I count myself dead lucky, and as working in telly, it's wonderful fun, or has been. Anyway, that's all over now. I've been involved with various charities, Water Aid, and Water Aid is terribly simple. They want to get clean water and sanitation to everyone in the world. It's very simple, goals, not utterly unachievable, but very simple. And they took me off to Bangladesh, and this is the slum in the middle of Dhaka, the capital. And you'll see that these are hanging latrines. Kids have to go out there and clamber up these little slopes in the middle of the night, no light, of course, anywhere. And they just crap through the hole in the bottom, and that's all the stuff floating about. And you can see it's yards from the houses. They can't dig holes because this is water, and it will just go straight in. And so what Water Aid and various others are trying to do is to organise communities within the slum. And this is a community of about 100 people, and these 4 women are in charge. The women, note, are in charge, always women in charge, because they're the ones who care. And the community put up so much money, usually so much a week, and Water Aid and so on put up so much, and together they build these latrines, cluster latrines, which are clean, concrete, proper septic tanks. They're big enough for women to look after themselves when they're having periods and so on. And the women make sure they're okay. And they were so pleased, they were so proud and pleased. It was really a pleasure to see this. And now, those 100 people are much better off. They're healthy. They don't get diseases. The women don't get disease. The kids don't have skin rashes, and they can go to school because they're not ill all the time. It makes a fantastic difference to their way of life. So it's not, rocket science. Building some concrete loos is not huge effort. And it actually doesn't cost very much, but it's a really good way of improving the lives of thousands and thousands of people, if not millions. And then I also got involved with Practical Action, whose slogan is Technology Changing Poverty. And this is in Kenya, this is Maasai country, where there's been no rain, or had been no rain then for many years. And you can see there's no grass, no bushes below, reachable by goats, and their animals are dying. And that was absolutely terrible. And another of their awful problems is that many women live in tiny houses and cook over what they call 3-stone fires. So they light an open fire and they cook over it, and the smoke is terrible. The smoke just fills the room. And they die of emphysema and chronic pneumonia and all that stuff. And of course the kids get ill too. And so what Practical Action have done is to persuade local people to make smoke hoods like this. This is made of mud and a bit of stainless steel up to the roof. And you can then have a much more efficient fire inside here, and there is no smoke outside. Saving lives by the thousand. Still, at the moment, I think a child dies every 15 seconds from breathing smoke, essentially. And another child dies every 15 seconds because the drinking water is contaminated with sewage. So trying to eradicate those things makes a fantastic difference to life expectancy. So that's why I got involved with those charities. And nowadays, I do almost none of that. I give boring lectures like this. I do a lot of woodwork. These are chairs I made. This one I made in 1999, and I sit on it every day for my meals. And this one I made a bit later. It's all wych elm, which is all bent, except that's oak. Wych elm bark. And I sit on this to do my work. I sit in front of my computer on that chair. And I make tables and bowls and spoons and so on. And I have a lot of time wrestling with wood, and it's good fun. And I go walking. This is down at North Mayo, and I love walking around here rather slowly. And I'm learning to draw. And this is just pencil. and I didn't have anyone else, so I drew this ugly bloke. And then watercolour. And this is very difficult and challenging, and I go every week and make even more new mistakes and thoroughly enjoy it. And so, as I said, there has never been a plan in my life. I still haven't decided what I want to do when I grow up, but that is my wobbly career. I'd be very happy to answer, or to try and answer easy questions, please. Some people say, can you explain the special relativity? And the answer is no.
All the mysteries you did, what was your favourite?
All the mysteries. The Baghdad battery is very high on that list because it really is hard to explain. A lot of the moving stones of racetrack playa was wonderful and beautiful, but I think it's probably explained now. But the Baghdad battery, we really do not know. And that's great. I mean, that's the essence of a perfect mystery. So I would put that high on my list. Besides the difficulty of setting it up. I had to set it up with a bloke from up north, near Hanover. He had to come down, and we were in Munich, so all the language was all wrong. And there was this Iraqi KGB man, the complicated and the German museum. And there was all these different bits of bureaucracy kicking in. So that was good. It was a very good challenge for me. One of the first foreign shoots I set up, and it worked, and I was very happy. So I remember that with enthusiasm. Yes?
You're quoted as working on tomorrow as well. Was that ever was
Sorry, say again?
It says in the Bible.
Yeah, it says all sorts of things there.
On tomorrow as well.
The last run of Tomorrow's World I did, yes, with Roger Black and Kate Humble. And it was wonderful fun. We really enjoyed it, and sadly they killed it then. Probably they didn't like my ugly mug, but it was great fun. There was a moment. Roger Black was a great sprinter, a sportsman, and a sort of handsome bloke, and I think that's one of the reasons I had him. And the executive producer Sally Dixon really fancied him. And on one item, he had to walk along a high beam, and they gave him a harness, tied him up. And she said, "Roger, if you'd like to keep the harness on, I'm sure we can arrange something after the show." But she said it on the foldback, so everyone in the studio heard this. Hoots of happy laughter, it was great. I mean, I'm sure she meant to say that. So that was great. That was the sort of atmosphere there was in the studio, and it was lovely fun. I used to stay in a flat in Paddington and bicycle along there, half an hour's ride, from February to 12 weeks through to whatever it is, April. And gradually I would watch the leaves come on the trees and the flowers. And that was a wonderful period of my life. Super. And then they killed it. Bastards. I love the BBC.
They get rid of everything that's successful, don't they?
Sorry?
BBC gets rid of everything that's successful.
Quite often, yes. Quite often, yes. And they keep people who don't make mistakes. So it's full of dead wood in the middle management. There are hundreds of people who don't do anything. The personnel department is called People, and there are 1,000 people in People who are all in a separate building, pushing bits of paper about. They've never seen a programme or anything like that. Yeah, similar. Well, probably worse than National Health. The National Health don't try and run magazines, well, that's true.
Well, that's the Trust magazine.
Yeah.
And there was I retired 5 years ago from nursing, and one of the things that started was eventually carrying off the ward. Was a good person's award. Well, like a good employee award once a month. So you haven't killed anybody.
Yeah, you can have an award.
If you kept your quota of items at the end of the shift, you got a good person's award. Then you'd have to pay £300 for the joint department to run.
Wonderful. Yes, sir.
What was your favourite on the Romans? Because I really loved that one.
The Romans was, well, I mean, I loved all of it actually, but that thing of dressing up in uniform was huge. It was the first time I'd ever dressed up on telly, apart from my cycling gear. And I thought, oh God, you really want me to put that? And they said, yes, yes, do. So I put on this gear, and it was fascinating because then I understood something like what it felt like to be a Roman soldier. And I said, this is the lorica, and here's the sublorica, and I'm not going any further than that. And this is and the pilum and the helmet and the shield, and I was able to describe from the inside what it must have felt like to be a Roman soldier. And that was a huge step forward. Now later, some of the, particularly the Tudors and Stuarts people, made me dress up again and again in ludicrous clothes. I was supposed to be Christopher Wren and Robert Hooke and somebody else having a conversation in a coffee bar. I had to dress up 3 times. You know, and this is just stupid, because we don't know what they look like anyway. But a Roman soldier, very characteristic, you know. And at the end of my piece to camera, wearing the uniform, a squad of Roman soldiers, you know, lookalikes, I mean, wannabes, came marching past, and I sort of went like this and joined them, and it looked absolutely perfect. You know, if we planned all that, it would have been ideal. So it really looked nice. So that was one of the best bits. I mean, I sat in Roman baths and scraped myself with a strigil, and I can't remember what else we did. A lot of other things. But
fired some weapons.
Yeah, I fired a repeating ballista, which was, you know, but that was, I think, the best. Sorry?
Shooting.
Yeah.
Firing.
Correct.
If you were given carte blanche to do a TV programme, what would you do?
I'd go back and do Local Heroes again, because it was such fun. It was made by a small independent company. We got to know one another really well. There was the total production team was 5 people, including me, which meant we all travelled in one vehicle. We've still got a list of 100 people in this country we wanted to do. And we could do Local Heroes Germany, we could do Local Heroes France, Local Heroes America, Australia, you know, endless, it goes on. And it was huge fun and a great variety of stuff, and people loved it. The BBC, of course, didn't. They got bored with it. They said, we don't want to do anything. You know, they did 6 series, but they got bored with it after that. And when I was working for the BBC, well, you take the last series I worked on, which is what the Ancients did for us, there was a production team of 25 people. There were 5 producers, and a series producer, and an executive producer who wanted to turn it into a game show. And then there was the program controller and the head of the department, and they all had to be involved in every decision. The result is decisions never got made. If you have a production team of 25, nobody can know what everyone's doing. Production team of 5 people, you're all talking to one another all the time, over breakfast, over lunch, in the car, you know what's happening. If you say, look, we've got a real problem because the boat is sunk, say, okay, we won't do the boat, we'll go and do the tractor instead, and we'll come back to the, that's fine. But the BBC couldn't do that. They're totally heavy-footed. And it got more and more complex. So, small crew, and for me, the best series of all was Local Heroes, the first one of all.
So it's basically death by bureaucracy.
Yeah, yes, exactly so. And over complication. The other thing is, when we did Local Heroes, we always did a lot of demos. We did very simple demos with bits of wood and string and saucepans stolen from our wives. And you could see that this went in here and this came down there and that went up. It was obvious. And you, the viewer, could think, oh, I could have done that. And it was almost like having your hands on. But when the BBC got their hands on it, they got big, complicated machines all surrounded by stainless steel or perspex. And it was quite obvious that I hadn't built them. They'd been built for me. And you couldn't quite see what was going on. And it destroyed the point. They just got the, I think, my view, got much less interesting. You as the viewer didn't feel involved. Oh, he's got another machine. It's like that. So, yes, I would go back to the very beginning. And I still like to do it. Yes?
Why do you think there's been this general sort of dumbing down or just total lack of science programming?
Well, okay. I think all programs are pretty deadly. We watch telly once a week. University Challenge if it's on, or the news. Have I got news for you? That sort of thing. I think it's all got dull. I think it's partly because the BBC generally have been horribly politically correct. It's partly because they've got all this middle management, and decisions are taken by committees always. When I was back at Yorkshire, if you had a good idea for a programme, it went on air. No committee. You went to the director of programmes, John Fairley, and I was able to walk into his office any time and said, look, I've got this idea, and if you liked it, it'll be on the following week. It's fantastic. BBC now, you're not even allowed to submit an idea for a programme unless you've already had programmes made by the BBC. So no new person no new person is ever allowed to submit a proposal. It's bonkers. It means you're only going to have the same boring stuff again and again. So all of this is conspiring against. Now, also, I think the serious downturn in science programmes came in the 90s with a bloke called John Lynch, who was head of science. And I got to know him quite well, but none of my programmes was ever produced in the science department. None of them. Tomorrow's World was its own department. All the others were produced in the history department. And I think they just Maybe they didn't like me, or they didn't like the science. I said to him once at a party, John, could we make a series called What is Science? Which is actually rather a good question. And he said, oh no, you can't use the S word, he said. The S word. He's the science department, for God's sake, you know. Yet he wouldn't, he may turn things into drama, which is just ludicrous. So I think they've gone, I think it's gone seriously downhill.
Can I add something to that? That's another reason that I get with lectures and with radio things, is they seem to have a fear of having anything that not everybody can understand. And I've often argued, well, I expected to sit here today, in my lecture this morning, I bet some of you didn't understand all of it, because I was actually throwing in some neuroscience and some other bits that might be, and it would perhaps go over your head. Well, does that matter? As long as you understand. Good. Because as long as you understand, as long as I can do it in a way that you understand the gist, if there's a bit you don't understand, then it doesn't matter. But there's this terror of, oh, we've got to speak to the, you know, we've got to think of the ordinary person who can't understand. Well, the ordinary person's full of it in a world that you don't understand lots of things.
So the ordinary person's not going to watch Horizon anyway. They also have, this terrible thing of slow motion footsteps in corridor and hand on doorknob, as though this was really exciting. And then you have an American sitting in front of a computer. Hang on, sorry. Yes, sir.
So surely the point about the lecture is not understanding it. The whole point of a lecture is to stimulate.
Push your audience. Yeah.
To do more research.
Yeah.
Google was invented for lectures like yours, like actually is to do more research.
Yeah, exactly. Or don't watch or don't listen to the lecture or walk out, you know, you don't have to. Yes.
I've just looked you up on IMDb with the distant hope of trying to answer a question. It doesn't answer it, so I don't know whether you were involved. Horizon actually did a program on the building of the Eddystone Light.
Right.
I know you wrote a book on it. Were the actual two of them actually linked? Did you
No, they didn't ask me or anything. No.
Okay.
No. I did. Was it the Eddystone Light? Wasn't it the Bishop Rock Lighthouse?
No, they actually did one on the Eddystone.
Eddystone did they?
And on the 3 people, they did the whole building of it.
Oh, well, I wish I'd seen that.
Because when you wrote your book about it when it was like 100 years old or something, didn't you?
I wrote the book about. I wrote the book about Henry and Stanley only.
Yes. Oh, right.
I haven't covered the other two or the other three. I've lectured about them. Hang on a sec, Fairy at the back.
And that was the anniversary of the Great Storm, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry?
You wrote that book to come out on the anniversary of the Great
Storm
that knocked it down.
So 1703, so it was 2003, and the publishers forgot about the anniversary. They asked me to do it, and I said I'd do it for the anniversary, and then they forgot. And the books, I went to and gave a lecture in Plymouth, and they haven't got the books there.
Just wanted to ask a bit of a technical question about the water rate.
Yes.
When you've got that water table at ground level,
yes.
How on earth do they make the toilets any better than that?
Well, because the septic tank is completely contained.
Septic tank down
That was the foreground. Sorry, I didn't explain. Huge concrete tank underground,
Yes,
which they'll have to pump out every now and then. But yes, they don't let it into the water table. Exactly. That's the real problem. Yes.
Yeah. You said earlier about Keith Robinson.
Yeah.
Is that you tell us about
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it? He asked me earlier what I was working on at the moment, and I'm writing a book about Heath Robinson.
Oh.
Heath Robinson, for those who don't know, worked about 100 years ago, and he drew the most wonderful pictures. One of my favourite ones, which I'm now fighting to get on the cover of this book, is an elegant and efficient machine for conveying peas to the mouth. And there's a waiter on one side, waiter on this side of the picture, who is feeding raw peas into a boiler. And as they get cooked, they get taken up on a conveyor belt over to the other side to a spoon, where there is a bloke sitting here in full evening dress, and when he's ready for a mouthful, he pulls the string, gets a mouthful of peas. And it's just so ludicrous. It's a real Heath Robinson production. And this is, the book is a collection of pictures, obviously, but what I want to do is write the real story behind the pictures. So for this picture, what I want to say, if they'll let me, is the problem was that in the strict Edwardian society, the only way to eat peas was on the back of your fork. And of course it's very difficult to eat peas on the back of the fork, they all fall off. Hence the well-known poem, I always eat peas with honey, I've done it the whole of my life, they do taste funny, but it keeps them on the knife. So anyway, to avoid having to eat peas on the back of the fork, obviously we build a machine up. Yes, it's entirely practical and solves a real social problem. And this is the sort of thing I want to talk about. And then how the fork was actually introduced by a man called Thomas Corriet, who walked from Wiltshire to Venice in the 16th century, wearing out several pairs of shoes, and wrote arguably the first travel book, and came back with a fork. First time anyone had seen it in England. It was a huge change. You know, before then they'd just eaten with a knife. You cut up the meat and you stab it. You know, but the fork was a huge step forward. Well, maybe. So this is the sort of thing I want to talk about. Or Heath Robinson draws pictures of a cement factory. Well, I too have been to a cement factory, probably the same one. So I know what it's like in there, and I can describe the heat and what it will appear like, all that. So I'm writing the real engineering or the real sociology behind Heath Robinson's crazy ideas. And I love the pictures, and to be involved in that is a great joy. A year ago they asked me to be involved, and it was then going to be published in May. We're now in almost exactly the same position. So the publishers are slightly curious. Yes, very at the back. So I'm very sorry to hold you up so long.
That's okay, I stand all day. Having investigated so many local heroes, engineers, scientists, who are your favourites?
Of all of them, the trouble is there are various categories. My greatest hero was somebody like Archimedes, who lived in Sicily sort of about 240 BC. But actually, the chap I most liked to have dinner with was Erasmus Darwin, Charles's grandfather. Now, he was a terrific chap. He was a doctor, and he started in Nottingham, and he had one patient who was a shoemaker who'd been stabbed by another shoemaker. Unfortunately, his patient died, and so he got no fee and no recommendation and 100% mortality. Not a good start for a young doctor. So he moved to Lichfield, and there a man came to him who'd been declared incurable. And he saw Dr. Darwin and got better. So then his reputation went zooming up, and he became a hugely popular doctor. And the king said, "Will you come to London and be my personal physician?" And he said, "No, I'd rather stay in Lichfield." And then a man came up to visit him for a consultation all the way from London, 2 days on a horse, you know. And Darwin examined him and said what he thought was wrong. And he said, Why have you come all this way to see me? Why didn't you go and see the celebrated Dr. Warren in London? And the other man said, "I am Dr. Warren." He was one of the founder members of the Lunar Society of Birmingham, who met on the night of the full moon, so they had light to ride home afterwards. And he would write to Bolton, Matthew Bolton, and say, "Dear Bolton, I haven't seen you so long, I think you must be dead. If so, let me know that I may write your epitaph. If not, then I come and see you on Tuesday week." And I made wonderful letters like this, and he wrote masses of poetry. He had 5 children with his wife, Polly, and then she died, sadly, and he had to hire a governess to look after the kids. And he had 2 children with the governess, and then he fell in love with a married woman, and mercifully her husband died, not being one of Darwin's patients, you understand. And so he married her and had 7 more, I mean, 14 children. He set up his 2 illegitimate daughters with a school to educate women. He was a very great philanthropist. And, I don't know whether it still runs today, but he was a wonderful, wonderful man. He had a terrible face because he had smallpox and he was all covered in pockmarks. And he had a terrible limp because he'd fallen out of his carriage and bust his hip. And he had a terrible speech impediment. And somebody said, "Do you mind about this?" He said, "No, on the contrary," he said, "it gives me time to think. And it stops me from asking difficult questions." I just think, what a wonderful guy to have dinner with. I just think a really, really nice, intelligent, interesting, friendly man. So that's my favourite. I have others, but I don't want to bore him.
Was it he who wrote that wonderful letter that you sometimes quote, and can you still remember it?
Yes. One time, he couldn't go to a meeting of the Lunar Society, and he said, "Dear Bolton, I'm sorry that I cannot be with your great men tonight. Lord, what wit, what rhetoric will fly like a shuttlecock from one to another of your troop of philosophers, while I, poor I, am imprisoned in a post-chaise, bumped and bustled and jogged and jostled along the King's Highway to give war to a pox or fever." And you just think, he could have said, "Sorry, I can't come." He wrote these wonderful letters. A great, great guy. Yes?
Do you have a favourite local hero to the southwest, then?
Yes. I'd go for Thomas Newcomen, who invented the first practical working steam engine, an ironmonger in Dartmouth. and started the Industrial Revolution. Abraham Darby, who'd been in Bristol, went up to start making iron using coke instead of charcoal, and 3 years later, Newcomen went up and installed the first Newcomen engine in Dudley, in the West Midlands. And that was how the Industrial Revolution took off. It took a long time to get very far, but the Newcomen engine, each one cost about £1,000, which was an awful lot of money in 1712. But they were so important that more than 1,000 of them were built before 1800. More than 1,000. All over the country, they were exported all over Europe. One even went to America with a bloke called Joseph Hornblower. It took him 6 weeks to cross the Atlantic, and he swore he'd never go to sea again, so he stayed there. But the Newcomen engine was the forerunner of all the engines we have today. You know, the engine in your electric toothbrush and the engine in your car and everything. So that's very, very important. But also, Henry Winstanley was a wonderful guy. He wasn't, he was born in Essex. Building the first Edison lighthouse was a fantastic story. And I'll bore you about that next year if you're desperate.
It's a pity we've only got you 1 day. You should have been here.
1 day is plenty.
Hang on, just unofficially, how many want Adam to come back next year?
No.
And his wife. And his wife. We'll have a conversation later, don't worry. And then I'll tell the committee.
Will you double the fee?
Yes.
That was my point.
I'll tell you what, Adam, if you come back next year, I'll buy you a pint.
I'm staggered.
Yeah.
I'm staggered.
Yeah. All right, Easter's money.
Any more?
We've still got about 15-20 minutes.
So. They're all brought to tears now. Tell us what's sleeping in the back. Yes, madam.
How did the rocks move?
How did the rocks move? I thought you might. I thought that was a wonderful story. It is a long way from anywhere. It really is a long way. Charlie and I went to Las Vegas, which is just closer than LA, and we had a long night in Las Vegas. Has anyone been to Vegas here? Yes. There are slot machines in the arrival lounge. I mean, you get off the plane and there are slot machines, and every hotel is complete. Anyway, it was very good fun. I learned a lot about poker. And in the morning, we staggered out and we rented an RV, a camper van, and we bought a barbecue and a lot of food, and we set off, and it's 6 hours drive. You drive up to Lathrop Wells, which was marked on the map as the same side as Las Vegas. Well, there are actually 3 buildings in Lathrop Wells. There's a gas station where we got some food, I got some petrol. There's a bar where we got some lunch, and there is a great shack with letters on the side saying Shamrock Brothel. Unfortunately, we were a bit short of time, but anyway. We went on into Death Valley, and then we drove up to Racetrack Playa, and we illegally stayed there the night, and I tell you, it was absolutely wonderful up there. And in the morning, early morning, we went out onto the playa, and there you could see the trails behind all these stones. You can't see it late in the day, because the sun is too high, there are no shadows. When the sun is low and just comes over the mountains, all those trails leave shadows behind them. Shall I went back to it? Does it go back? No. Right, I can't go back to it. Oh, I know. No, I can't. But there are trails behind the rocks. And the thing is that the ground is really hard.
Keep going.
Yay! Now you can see that you can see how low the sun is by the length of the shadow. This rock is about the size of a couple of bricks side by side. It's about 8-9 inches square, and you can see the trail because the sun is so low. If the sun is any higher, you just don't see them. And because there are hundreds of rocks on the playa, but it's so big you can hardly see the next one. It might be 100 yards away, and it's a dot, and it might turn out to be a burrow dropping. There are wild burrows about. Well, all sorts of people have theories, and one of the theories is that every now and then it rains. And it can be very cold there because it's desert and it's middle of the thing, and the water may freeze, so you get ice. And of course, ice is slippery, and they say, "Oh, it slipped on the ice." So these researchers, what they did was to take 10 stones, and each one they painted a number on the stone, number 7 or whatever it is, and they put a stake in the ground 10 feet west of it, and they marked that number 7, so they would know whether the stone had moved. That's how they know that the stones move about once a year. And on average, they move about 20 meters, I think it is. And then what they did was to put a corral of stakes all the way around, stakes smaller than with the gaps smaller than the stone. So if there was, bigger than a stone but smaller, so if there was a sheet of ice, the ice sheet couldn't move. And yet the stones moved out of the corral. And indeed in one case there were 2 stones in the corral and one moved out and the other one didn't. So that, to me, totally disproves the ice theory. It seems to me if there's a sheet of ice, that's not going to be slippery, that's not going to move on the surface. And if the rocks are frozen into the ice, they won't slide on top of it. So that it seems to me the ice theory is bonkers anyway, but it still survived. But what we did notice, when the crew arrived, I flew in and we did this research, and then the crew arrived and I had to go out to sort out the next location. And that night it rained. And the crew said, oh wow, you must get some pictures of the rain. And they walked out and they couldn't stand up. It was unbelievably slippery. And it so happens this is a particular sort of clay. It's Montmorillonite clay, something like that. I can't remember the name exactly. And when it gets wet, you get layers of clay, silicate layers, a long way apart. And they slide over one another incredibly easily. And it was more slippery, these guys said, than soap on a shower floor or ferroliquid. It was unbelievably slippery. Now, if it's so slippery, and the wind comes at 90 miles an hour through the mountains, maybe a rock could just tilt and begin to skate on this film of mud. And that would be why they leave trails, because the mud, of course, is very soft then. And then when it dries out, the thing would be frozen in time, so that the trails would last forever. So it's almost certainly the wind. And it's been observed that they generally travel nearly in straight lines, but sometimes with a little curve. And that's quite often 2 or 3 stones will travel in parallel, and maybe with a little curve. And that, that makes sense with wind. Wind doesn't always go in a straight line, but generally it's an easterly wind or whatever it is. So it's almost certainly the wind after the rain. But nobody's ever seen a stone move. Oh yes, I lied. There is a really bad, if you Google it, there's a really bad video online now. Some of you saw it. And if you look here, you could just see the thing is moving. I mean, only just. And they claim it's ice, and I just think it's bullshit. I think they're just wrong. But otherwise, until then, nobody had ever seen a stone. It seems to happen in the night. It happens only when there's a violent storm. You don't really want to be there in a violent storm. As I say, you're 30 miles from another building. It's very remote.
So in that respect, it's similar to sort of some of the movement they think happens on Mars, isn't it?
Could be, could be. Yeah, they have lots of wind up there, although not much rain. But the dust may be soft, and I don't know. Maybe they know.
But we do know there is evidence of briny water now moving underneath.
Oh, but not on the surface.
No, but just underneath the surface. Right. So it might be some similar effect.
It could be. Yes.
Could you possibly quickly explain the lunar societies to people? I keep trying to explain them to people, but they think right.
The Lunar Society, they were a bunch of people who started meeting in 1765 in Birmingham. It was started by Matthew Bolton, who used to make buckles and buttons and little boxes and things like that. And his doctor, who was called William Small, who'd been in Virginia in the colonies and had come back, and Erasmus Darwin, who I told you about. And they gradually gathered other people. There was a bloke called Whitehead, and there was a man called Joseph Priestley joined them later, and there was Richard Lovell Edgeworth and Thomas Day. I mean, a group, eventually there was about a dozen people. They were highly intellectual, and they were nearly all manufacturers of some sort. Josiah Wedgwood was another member. He was the chap who turned pottery into an international business. And they would meet once a month to discuss matters philosophical, in fact, science and technology and production. And one of them, for example, Erasmus Darwin, invented and designed a windmill with which Wedgwood could grind up flint to put in his pottery. And they would meet. Sorry? Thank you. They would meet once a month, and they would have dinner at sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they would talk on into the night.
And drink.
And drink. They did. Erasmus Darwin never drank. He was a teetotaler. But on the whole, they drank, yes. And then, of course, they had to get home, and some of them had 20 miles to go. Darwin had to go all the way to Lichfield. And so they needed light to get home. So they always met on the Sunday nearest the full moon, which is why they called themselves the Lunar Society, or Lunatics of Birmingham. And they went on meeting until about 1800, about 35 years, extraordinary, once a month. And they did, had wonderful discussions, but they never kept any records, and we don't know what they talked about much. They did some experiments.
People sort of, what of course happened with the local oiks like us would have heard this term lunar society and thought they were doing strange evil rituals.
They did do some strange things. They wondered, for example, why thunder rumbles.
Yeah. It's just thunder light.
Doesn't just go bang, it goes rum, rum, rum. And so they thought the only thing to do was do an experiment. So Bolton made a balloon out of varnished paper. They didn't have rubber then. 5 feet in diameter. I mean, the thought of varnishing all that paper to make an airtight balloon. And they filled it with a mixture of hydrogen and air, which is terrifying. I mean, if you let it off in this room, it would demolish the hotel. I mean, this is a serious bomb. And they let it go with a long fuse one lovely summer evening, and it floated away, and they're all listening like this. And the fuse was very long. And they began to chat and say, oh God, it's gone out. Oh dear, oh pity. Well, we'll have to do another one. And then it went off. Bang! And of course, they weren't listening. They forgot to listen whether it rumbled or not. So it was a complete waste of time. James Watt, who didn't go, he was a member, but didn't actually go to that meeting. He was at home. And he said the explosion was very loud and immediate and lasted about 1 second. I don't understand what immediate and lasted about 1 second meant. But anyway, that's what he said. So this was the sort of experiment they proposed, which was that one was a complete failure. But they did extraordinary things like that. They were a great gang. You could argue that they were the intellectual powerhouse of the Industrial Revolution because it was happening all around them. And they built a canal. I mean, not they, but a canal was built past Wedgwood's place at Etruria to take his crockery to Liverpool. Because when it went by road, it all got broken. Going by canal, nice and gentle, and it all arrived in one piece. And he made that extraordinary set for the Tsarina.
Enormous advanced the canals were, of course. One horse could move 20 tons.
Well, yes, exactly. One horse can carry half a ton, can tow 10 tons on a truck, but 100 tons on a barge. And, dirt cheap, so very slow. The extraordinary dinner service he made for Russia is still there in St. Petersburg in the what's it called? Sonnenhof.
No. Yeah,
Beethoven, the Beethoven Museum, yeah. Perhaps it's there on the table. And they just think, wow, made in Etruria in 1780.
I assume the experiment was intended to determine whether the rumble is an echo or whether it's a continuing noise.
Yes. Well, I don't know because they didn't keep records. All we know is that. But yes, I imagine so. And of course, the reason it rumbles is that it happens over a huge range. It makes the lightning stroke may go over a mile from the cloud to the ground, or the other way around. And of course, at each instant, it's making a huge crack, and it'll come quicker to you from close by than it does from a mile up. And so it appears to take a long time. It's actually only one bang, but it's elongated by the distance. Yes?
Will you be signing?
This is it. This is the last one. I'm not live anymore.
Will you be signing any of your books for us if we want you to?
Well, yeah, if you've got books, I'll sign them. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
If you bought a book, that's amazing.
Yeah. That doesn't coincidence.
I'll allow you that one.
One more question if anyone wants one. No?
Do you ever wish you'd got to do more in hard science?
Yes, I wanted to. I always wanted to. I did all this training. I did a degree and a doctorate and 3 years of research in order to get a job in university in chemistry. Couldn't get one. The thing is, the university expanded in the late 60s because of the baby boom. By 1970-71, they were contracting again, and all full of thrusting young lecturers. They didn't want a boring young fart, it was just one more. So they said no. There was one job in Canada in 1970, one in the UK in 1971, and I didn't get either of them. So I dropped out into publishing. And I've been a dropout all my life, really.
And we're all thankful for that.
Thank you for being a lovely audience, and particularly for laughing at the joke. I really appreciate it. My script writers were working on that for years.